Thank you so much. And I'm going without a PowerPoint this morning. So yeah, let's do good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Annapolis. We're so happy to have you here. I work at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We have a really neat campus just on the other side of Annapolis. So I encourage you, if you need a break and want to get some fresh air, you're welcome to stop by our offices and take a walk or go see the bay. We're right on the Chesapeake Bay. And we have an area where you can actually do a little bit of a hike. So if anybody needs some fresh air, please stop by and you're absolutely welcome. I want to thank all of you, the Chesapeake Research Consortium, and Denise, who has become a really good friend and colleague. Anna and Martha did a fantastic job this morning and have done such great work to bring the community together. I'm just grateful for their partnership and their time. Also, I have an undergraduate degree from Franklin and Marshall College, and I know that Dr. Dorothy Merritt's is on this morning. Dorothy was my advisor freshman year of my time at F&M. So, hi, Dorothy. Hope to see you soon. I know she's driving down right now with Bob. I actually also have a graduate degree from the University of Vermont in participatory computer modeling. Therefore I have a physical science degree and a social science degree, and both have served me quite well. So for those social scientists in the room, welcome, and we're really happy to have you. For those of you who don't know me, I grew up exploring the Chesapeake Bay with my dad, photographer Dave Harp. He was working for the Baltimore Sun for years, and I would go on assignment with him. I was the one carrying the cameras through marshes, mostly at sunrise to my chagrin, sometimes at sunset, which was really awesome. And it was an absolute privilege to be able to see the bay, to explore the edges, to go down to Smith Island and talk to watermen. We ran aground a lot. For those of you who have experienced the bay, you know that this is part of the fun. We also were able to chicken neck off the docks of the bay, and my sister and I one afternoon caught a half a bushel of crabs just off of chicken necks. And when I think about the Chesapeake Bay, those are the memories that come to mind. And I know so many of you, whether it's exploring your community or fishing with your grandfather, there's so many reasons that we come to this work, and I hope we always keep those central. I learned a great deal following my father and listening to the stories of the people he was covering. I was a sponge, learning from the many individuals who started the modern Chesapeake Bay movement. And for many of us, we know the last half century has been reflecting back to a time of cleaner air, cleaner water, more abundant wildlife. We've sought to restore what was lost and preserve what was left. It gave me a lot to consider as I traveled the country to see places and meet new people. I had the opportunity to learn from the Great Lakes, the Mississippi River Delta, the Columbia and Snake Rivers, to see the challenges out west and large landscapes, everything from butterflies to bison. And with all of these special places, I learned that it was the interconnected challenges between people and nature that were the most interesting. Nowhere is there a greater opportunity to learn about this than in our own backyard. It's impossible to separate the two, the people from the place. That's as true on harbors, streams, rivers, and the Chesapeake Bay as it is across the country. How can we create a future where we meet the challenges for people and nature and where both can thrive? At National Wildlife Federation, I spent many years growing as a professional, but at one time I was a very young manager, managing a very large team. Those of you who have had the experience of development as a manager and personnel evaluations and the very celebrated 360 evaluation process, which I believe is always best served with a bourbon. I had a fantastic colleague who I'd call when I couldn't figure out a management issue or struggle with a colleague. He was on speed dial, which existed at this time. His mantra became feedback is a gift. And I sat with that concept for a long time and now completely embrace it. To me, feedback became a way to look at my strengths and weaknesses objectively, and as a leader and a coach, it was a chance to tell colleagues where they were excelling and discuss situations that hadn't gone well. Feedback was the way that strong leaders got stronger. But this kind of feedback doesn't always feel like the gift you receive at your birthday. It's not a new phone or a gift card to your favorite restaurant. Feedback is a gift the way that kale is a gift. It makes you healthier, better, it provides energy. I share this story because I think that the Caesar report was that kind of gift, the gift of feedback. Not always the gift that you desperately want, but the gift that you desperately need. Moving away from comfort and understanding to uncomfortable conversations and ultimately growth. So I am here today to say thank you. Thank you to all of you for the gifts as scientists that you provide us every day. More questions than answers, uncomfortable and inconvenient truths, and complexity with a whole lot of gray area. As many of you know, there is still too much pollution entering the Chesapeake Bay. Despite enormous effort and incredible progress, the resources we've sought to protect are still at great risk. The water is not clean enough, the air is not safe enough, and the wildlife continue to disappear. Climate change is an existential and immediate threat to all of us. The world we live in today and the scale of threats we face demand new approaches, ones that build on what has worked, but looks forward, not back. The science of today, highlighted in the Caesar report, talks about some of the challenges that we have and the importance, but over-reliance on modeled results for the Chesapeake Bay and not being clear about the trade-offs and uncertainty embedded in them. An implementation gap, a response gap, a mass balance challenge because of the economic realities of farming and feeding the world, and a growing population that drives increased production and therefore increased nutrient demand. Not covered by the Caesar report, but something that I worry about every day: waning political leadership, fatigue, and what my dear friend calls the meh. When I was applying for this job, over the course of 6 months of the pandemic, I interviewed many times, but my only in-person interview was actually at a board member's house who was leading the search for the next head of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And I was told very clearly that even though I had gone through many different interviews, that this was not, in fact, an interview. We got through drinks and dinner and dessert, and we sat down, and I was about to take a bite of cake, and one of the board members looked at me and she said, "Can we talk about 2025? And then I realized it was absolutely an interview. And I'll tell you what I told her at the time, and that very concerned group of Chesapeake Bay Foundation board members. The bottom line is that 2025 is a deadline, not the finish line. And if we seize it, 2025 is a new beginning. The deadline that Anna and Martha talked about and the agreement that sets it follows 3 decades of agreements on the Bay, 31 goals and outcomes, and ultimately removing the Chesapeake Bay from EPA's Dirty Waters list. The Chesapeake Clean Water Blueprint, or since I'm amongst friends, the TMDL, currently focuses on reducing 3 pollutants: nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment that choke the bay of light and oxygen and the plants and animals need to survive. Its concrete targets for reducing pollution require the states to develop and implement plans that meet them and the legal accountability framework that resulted in more progress than ever before. Most importantly, it's the first agreement that includes every single state in the watershed in the District of Columbia. Its partnership is its greatest strength. And we have seen progress: shrinking dead zones, oysters and more oysters. 22% of the watershed is permanently protected from development, bay grasses coming back in critical places, and major tributaries showing resilience and creating hope. What needs to happen within our community to meet the moment and learn from the past? We've talked a lot about the process that Anna and Martha have been leading, and what we need to see now over the next 6 months in particular is demonstrated leadership and commitments at the top. We need to refocus and re-energize political support, secretaries, governors, the EPA, and federal partners. We need to create bold plans and demonstrated pathways for progress. The next chapter, one that builds on the scientific underpinnings and experiences of the past, embraces novel science and technology, and defines a clear forward-facing vision. We need curiosity and humility. Restoring a bay as large and complex as the Chesapeake in a watershed as dynamic and heavily developed as ours is a phenomenal task. Over the past 41 years of partnership, we've gained an incredible wealth of knowledge, arguably more than any other restoration effort in the world. How can we create a place that allows both people and the natural world to thrive? Yet we've learned that some of our approaches are not working or could work better. As Denise says, and we agree on this is not failure. However, refusing to learn, to use what we've learned would be. We need to empower experts with the authority to make big changes and act decisively. The right people with decision-making power and ownership of the task at hand need to be at the table. This includes breaking down silos between programs and those who may not have been part of the Bay Partnership, but who could contribute significantly to its goals. We also need to stop counting things just for the sake of counting them. Restorations, programs, and projects are assessed largely on their ability to gain credits towards their goals, which turns a single-minded focus on restoration activities that address nitrogen and phosphorus reductions from the upper watershed in order to alleviate the bay's low oxygen dead zones. While reducing nitrogen and phosphorus pollution and dead zones, it feels critical to a healthy bay. The additional goals in the Chesapeake Bay Agreement to focus on living resources and habitat matter greatly. Programs must be able to address these goals as well, something the current framework has been challenged to do. We also can reimagine an accountability framework to support meaningful progress across states and agencies and promote learning. We can learn while doing. These goals should be built cohesively towards the watershed's long-term vision, and the accountability framework should set clear, achievable, and near-term targets that are enforceable along the way. A clear, forward-facing vision of a functional Chesapeake Bay watershed should form the basis for any new plan for the future. Your science has created an opportunity to change our approaches and ultimately to get better at our work. We know, and we've seen already, that adopting a whole watershed approach could coordinate efforts and resources in the places where they will be most effective. This approach should maintain focus on achieving difficult long-term targets such as water quality in the deep channel, while prioritizing restoration and monitoring that has a high likelihood of approving living resources in the near term. This would not only improve the effectiveness of our investments by targeting high-impact geographies, but also ensure that multiple management practices and restoration projects are working in concert and amplify the benefits to living resources and communities. I'd love to see the implementation of a true pay-for-outcomes program that rewards real-world results, particularly in programs that target non-point source pollution from agricultural and urban suburban lands. This will help facilitate a scientific approach to restoration that connects investments directly to verifiable outcomes for living resources. It will also help promote critical learning about effectiveness and success to allow true adaptive management. This approach can be achieved both through the development of new programs that base restoration investments on outcomes and incentivize outcome documentation, as well as through changes to existing programs that provide flexibility in crediting approaches to link crediting to outcomes. We need to forcefully address our mass balance problem. Our ability to reduce pollution is fundamentally challenged by the sheer amount of nutrients brought into the watershed in the form of increasingly concentrated agriculture, particularly livestock farming, and increasing fertilizer use and turf grass in developed areas. These highly concentrated pollution sources cannot be solved by conservation practices alone. There is urgent need to provide regional solutions, including working with the private sector, especially agribusiness, to directly address these issues. Integrating climate work, land use planning, and watershed restoration much closely across all of our programs. This includes explicitly addressing climate change through restoration work that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and stores carbon. This requires a redesign of the way we approach science restoration goals and our accountability framework to optimize for resiliency efforts. We can turn coastal communities who are feeling the worst effects of climate change into learning laboratories in some of my favorite places, including Tangier and Smith Island. We also need to enable equitable solutions in our work and the movement. This means not only focusing resources to the communities that bear the disproportionate burden of pollution and vulnerability to climate change, it means ensuring all communities have a voice and seat at the table. We also need to make significant and new investments in the scientific monitoring and infrastructure that's essential for evaluating the efficacy of restoration efforts and how fish, wildlife, habitats, and human communities are responding. We can do this also by incorporating social science practices in the development of restoration efforts, and as we learned this morning, Indigenous ways of knowing. We can do this by bringing people together. The great thing is that we, all the partners working on Chesapeake Bay restoration, the grassroots coordinators, the soil conservationists, the community organizers, policymakers, and yes, of course, scientists, are already building this future. We're working with farmers to regenerate the health of the soil, improving the economic vitality of small farms and rural communities, and building the capacity to withstand floods and droughts climate change is exacerbating. We're working with community organizers to identify where city streets and playgrounds are dangerously hot. Together, we're creating green spaces and improve the health of children who play there and the water quality in the streams they swim and fish in. We're building large-scale oyster reefs, inspiring the next generation of city planners and engineers, and ensuring communities have a voice in the decisions that affect their air, water, and health. And we're ensuring accountability frameworks are being forced and adding policies when we see gaps. What happens when we get there? Clean water, closest to people for swimming and fishing, public beaches back on the Potomac River. Green spaces and access to nature for everyone on every street across 64,000 square miles. A booming oyster industry, growing small businesses across Maryland and Virginia. Upstream communities getting the healthy and resilient streams they want and deserve, and an outdoor economy that will build the future. Cities, towns, and farms that look more like nature, sponging up water and making it cleaner. The Bay will never be saved by looking back. It will only be saved by concentrating on the road ahead. We can become a community that not only celebrates results and wins, but celebrates feedback and learning. We can meet the moment, the challenges, and the uncertainty by coming together. If we accept that we should not seek to save the Bay from people, but for people, we will create a movement and a watershed that work for everyone, for us and for nature. And this is the opportunity we have together. Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, we have time for some questions.
Oh, right here. Yeah.
So from your new perspective, what would you say is like the number one biggest challenge, or I guess you would say helping it fail? The Chesapeake Bay faces now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same problem we've always had, a 14-to-1 land to water ratio. But I think the biggest challenge is just whether the practices we're putting on the land are working in the way that we want them to, and are we putting enough of them there? And I know it's so hard to figure out how these things interact, but when we're going out and looking at impact, we want to know that the work that we're doing is having the impact that we all want and deserve. And so I really think the Kale is it working? And not really sugarcoating that, but taking a hard look at what we're doing, and also say at the same time we can keep doing those practices. We need to keep going as we're learning about what's working and what's not working. And I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. This community has done a lot of incredible things. We can keep going on the work that we're doing, and we can learn and get better at it. But until we actually stare at these things straight down and not sugarcoat them, I don't know that we're going to make the progress that we really want and deserve. Thanks. One over here. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for that. Something that you said made me think about, you talked about livestock and sugar grass. And I'm going to say that I made this implication, not to say you did.
Yeah.
That, it's not just kind of, I think implications of any like you can't fix
Right. Right.
Am I right? And do you have any comments on that?
I have hopeful comments on it. I mean, I think one of the things that maybe we haven't done as well is go directly to the source of these problems, not with, I'm going to blame and shame you, and we're going to, duke it out, which we know that the Chesapeake Bay Foundation sometimes loves to do. But what if we went and just said, here's our problem? Like, what are we going to do about it together? How could we collectively solve these problems that have plagued us for so long? So maybe just a different approach and different set of conversations. But it's not saying that these are easy challenges. If they were easy, I think we would have figured them out by now. Yeah.
Congress one day
Gosh, I'm glad I've had a lot of coffee today. One legislation. I mean, I would love to see an update to the Clean Water Act. We will not be seeing an update to the Clean Water Act. I would love to see an update to the Clean Water Act that was really a 21st century Clean Water Act. We have a 20th century Clean Water Act. We have a lot of 20th century legislation that everybody is terrified to reopen. But I also think that we will not get there just by, even if I had my magic wand and my superpowers on this, it would not do everything. I think this is we have sold this for so long as a public problem, and we need to go and look at what sort of private markets and the private industry, the role that they could play in helping to solve it. Again, legislation's great, regulations are great, those are really, really important, and will not get us there. We need to look at private investment in these issues. I mean, I think, again, a lot of it was built around pipes, and we've done really well with pipes in this country, not perfectly, and I think we see a lot of places, and certainly frontline communities that have borne the brunt of the places where we haven't. But I do think we could do more on non-point source pollution, even if it's in, trying to figure out how to do that is a whole different story.
Like legislating
Yeah.
All right, any more questions? Yes, Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like how you said that the approach moving forward as safety for people, not safety from. I think saying that and choosing that approach makes it very possible to get more buy-in and support from the people, so. I appreciate that. My question is, do you think we currently understand that future beautiful bay vision through the lens of the community, the people that we're talking about, or are we asking to still maybe more clearly define what that?
I think it's a great question. It's funny, I was just at the end of writing this, and I keep trying to nail down all the things that if we looked into the future, what we'd find. And I felt like I was really coming up short, even with, clean water closest to people, green spaces, booming industry, upstream communities. I would love an opportunity to have a conversation about that and really include a lot of people who have not been included in that conversation. And ground truth, what would that future bay look and feel like if we could close our eyes and imagine it? And so I don't have a perfect answer, but I love that conversation. And if anybody has ideas on what that could look like, I'm all ears, because I'd love to keep adding to my list, and especially have it be ground truth with the individuals who are living in communities and can see what's just ahead. I mean, I think we are really seeing some of these things come online. So how can we paint that beautiful picture of the future?
Any more questions? Hilary? Got time.
Big surprise.
Oh, did he? Who's gonna ask me a question?
Thanks for the kale reference. Now I know
Yeah.
Caesar salad is actually a kale salad.
Oh my goodness. So I didn't even think about it.
So is what you're talking about, that conversation, is that the way forward to address the meth problem?
I think so.
And like, what do you do in your role about the leadership issue up here?
Yeah.
Is there a promising approach to that?
Yeah, great question. I think it starts with reframing what we're talking about, and building that vision for the future, those exciting ideas. And I do think, we did this to ourselves, on some level. We created deadlines, which were great. We created metrics, which were great. And then we said that would be it. I'm like, oh no. I talked to a group of high schoolers and I was like, it's forever. This is forever work. And that's okay. It's okay. So I think part of it is reimagining and re-envisioning and building excitement about the future and getting us out of the myth. And so that'll go a long way. I also spend a lot of my time talking to the secretaries of natural resource, governors, EPA leadership, federal leadership, my friends over here, on the best pep talk I can do. Like, we can do this. We have to do this. It's so important. The world's watching. If we can do it here, we can do it other places. And I think all of that, a reframing of what this is about, that we are doing this for people and communities and nature. We can thrive in the future. We just need to think about it differently. I think that's part of it. But I'm all ears on the next marketing campaign. And I think just getting people, I think challenge is good. I think we can embrace that, and we can do hard things, and we'll find enjoyment in doing them.
More questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for that great presentation. I want to build on a couple of the previous sort of math approach. You mentioned the implementation gap and the response gap, and I think a conversation is really needed and essential. But do you think there are any other steps that we need to take in terms of policy or guidelines or anything that can help close some of those gaps?
Yeah, and I do, and I don't know that we have all of the answers. I love that Caesar created more questions. Thanks, guys. Than answers, and so I think we should continue to figure out what those policy responses. The whole Watershed Act in Maryland this year was an attempt at that, but I think we need a lot more attempts at what this looks like, sandboxing some of these new ideas, enabling, innovation doesn't just happen. Like, it's really easy just to do the same thing. So how do we enable innovation and really talk about things? And it's okay if those individual things fail. We'll keep learning. So I don't know exactly how to approach it, but I think the answer is yes, and we need to answer more questions with questions, and keep going on this conversation, because I think we're starting to really, we're seeing that some of these ideas and some of these questions are really taking hold.
Any more questions?
Good morning.
What
Lou.
are, sitting today, for the people, not from the people. Health science, social science is showing us that being outside, being in a natural environment is maybe a particular one of it. Is there a nexus between the work we do and that kind of connection? And is that being communicated?
Absolutely. And I think there are some really great organizations that are trying to make those connections. I think my friends at Nature Sacred are doing a great job. We don't know about them, but this idea of nature is healing. I think there are a number of hospitals that are seeing this now, and mental health, that these are really inextricably linked. We have a practitioner and I have a colleague at Chesapeake Bay Foundation who uses forest bathing as part of his work. And he is in military service, and forest bathing helps with PTSD. And I think we could look at forest bathing or spending time on the bay, you know, all these opportunities that we have. Not everybody has those, so we need to work. I think we need to work really hard on that. But I think that's a great opportunity. And thank you for not asking me a modeling question.
More questions? No? Okay, well, let's thank Hilary.
Thank you so much.